Welcome to ESM Presents Marvel's Runaways, a Hulu original series that we're going to be talking about here. Unfortunately, Tiffany's not with us this week, but she will be with us starting with episode 3. But we do have Darrell Goodwin with us. What's up, Darrell?
Everything is up, man. I'm so full of all this Thanksgiving food. It's been days since Thanksgiving. That's why our schedule's been a little hectic. But somehow I haven't run out of turkey and ham yet. So I don't know if I'm doing Thanksgiving right or Thanksgiving wrong.
There's no wrong way to do Thanksgiving. You do Thanksgiving how you want to do Thanksgiving.
Fair enough. And during all of this Thanksgiving insanity, I was able to watch the first 2 episodes of Runaways.
Mm-hmm. No, yes, I did as well. And I'm very excited to talk about it. What really got me right off the bat is the fact that Hulu now has Marvel on top of Netflix. What did you think of that just in general before we start talking about these first 2 episodes?
It's weird. It's interesting that Marvel is willing to kind of put their content anywhere you can get content. We've got Marvel on ABC with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We've got a fistful of series from Marvel on Netflix. And now we're getting a little bit of Marvel on Hulu. And even moving forward, we're going to get Marvel in other places. We're getting a couple seasons or series rather on Freeform. So Marvel is making it so that it doesn't matter where you get your content. You've got an in into their products, into their worlds. Now, it does raise the question of how closely or not closely at all is this tied into the greater MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Because as far as I can tell, even though one of the characters in the Runaways books is a mutant, they haven't mentioned that in this show, which is kind of the defining thing. All the mutant and mutant-associated things belong to Fox now, whereas Marvel can't use that word. So it makes me think that this is somewhere in that universe. Don't know, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, they can't say the word mutant because Fox owns it.
Right.
So that means it's perfectly okay that it's part of the greater MCU. Now, obviously, I don't know if you guys, and this is really getting into superhero news, but what'll be interesting is if Disney buys that arm of Fox, because that was talks. I don't know if it's done not, but
it's dead. That was the great news for an afternoon. That by the time everyone heard the news that Marvel and Fox were actually in talks, and Marvel / Disney was just going to outright buy Fox instead of Marvel trying to buy back all of their X-Men and Fantastic Four stuff. Disney was just going to buy Fox. I mean, let's make it simple. Let's have our parent company buy your parent company, and then everything's fine. Well, those talks broke down not long after they started. So by the time people actually got around to posting the articles that this was happening, they were also getting the retraction that, well, we did talk, but it's dead. So there was a couple hours a Sunday or 3 ago where everybody was like, oh, man, look at this thing. Oh, and we're sad again.
Oh, you're talking about the most recent one then.
Yeah.
Beginning of November talks.
Yeah, it was real recent.
Got it. That's funny because I never saw the retractions yet, but I'm sure if I looked, I would find them.
I mean, if you go back and just read the articles you were reading that said, hey, this is happening, there'll be a little blurb at the bottom say, by the time of writing, we discovered that this was not happening anymore.
Because a lot of people are oh, it's on, it's off, it's on. This is something that's been common because Fox doesn't think they're making money. So let's talk a little bit about the Runaways. So, why don't you kind of lead the way? I know we talked about, in Star Trek, I was kind of the Star Trek person, and you had known very little Star Trek, and Tiffany was kind of the middle person. And I think here, you were definitely the bigger Runaway fan, where I liked it, but I don't remember as much. So why don't you kind of give everyone kind of your rundown of your familiarity with Runaways, kind of before the show even started?
Well, me and Runaways go way back, because whenever Runaways, the first comic book that ever came out titled Runaways with these characters was written by a guy named Brian Vaughan, who is fantastic. Everything this guy writes is good. He never has a bad day. And he wrote a couple episodes of Lost. I mean, this guy has all the credit you want. And I was like, okay, he's coming out with a Marvel book. I'm going to check that out. And I don't know if it was maybe I was dealing with a little bit of superhero fatigue at the time, or if maybe just in a general sense, people were dealing with superhero fatigue, like other comic book readers. But we got this book, and it was just such a weird breath of fresh air. The Runaways are these 6 kids whose parents are kind of an evil master, like an evil group of villains. And they basically run the crime scene in LA. Like they're kind of like the mob, but a little less organized crime and a little more like evil CEO board, like board meetings. And then, by the way, this is all about crime and evil. And these kids figure out that their parents are these things, and they're like, oh, this is terrible. So they run away. They're just like, we're not going to be a part of this. We're not going to be any part of this. So they just bail. They don't go out and become superheroes and stop guys from robbing banks. They just take themselves out of that situation because it's terrible and they don't want to be a part of that. So, and each of the characters is kind of a different style of superpowered person from Marvel. Like, one kid just uses technology. One kid's a mutant. One kid's an inhuman. One kid's an alien. Like each one of them is like your different flavor of sci-fi, which is kind of neat. It lets Brian Vaughan and the writers and creators of the show kind of play in each of those sandboxes all at the same time. So you get a lot of like sci-fi tropes and stuff that they kind of spin a little bit their way, and that's a lot of fun. But whenever you look at each of the kids, they all feel very real. Like none of the kids feel too perfect. There's the jock who's dumb, and he says the wrong thing a lot. He's either using the wrong phrase or says something that's actually pretty offensive, and the other kids are like, hey, how about you not say that? Don't be a jerk. And he's like, what? I didn't realize that it was a bad thing. So that feels really good. The like goth girl does in the books anyway, does a little bit of self-harm, but she's also working through that. And each one of these, like there's a kid that's dramatically younger than the rest of them. So she's just played more immature as everyone else. Like all of these kids feel so real. And it was an astounding book. I think the first run lasted for 24 issues, a couple years, and then they brought it back for like 18 more issues. And I've read in various forms, either in actual physical books or through Comixology. I've read all of them because they're just fantastic, and the art is so superb. And they've actually rebooted it recently. So if you're of a comic book reading, you should maybe go out into your comic store and find those because they're really nice. But yeah, that's where I come into Runaways. So as soon as I saw that this was being a show, I got super excited. And then I saw the casting and saw the 6 kids that were going to play these kids. And outside of Molly, they all look perfect. They aged Molly up a little bit, which I kind of understand why. Because it'd be weird to have this like 11-year-old hanging out with kids who look like they're 18 or 19. So they aged her up to about 14, 15, just a couple years younger than everybody else. But the little girl who plays Molly really, like, she's just a treat to see on screen. So like all of these kids are perfect. From the moment I saw like the opening sequence and these kids moving around, I was like, oh, this is great. This is so like, this is perfect. What about you? Like, where do you come in for the Runaways?
Did you read Runaways right when it came out, or did you read it later? I'm just curious.
I read it like whenever the 3rd or 4th issue was coming out, because I'm kind of hesitant to jump on a new book. And I always have been for a long time, because there were so many stories that I picked up and got 3 books in, and they're like, canceled, so you'll never hear the end of it. Battle Chasers, I'm looking at you. And so 3 or 4 issues in, someone was like, no, this is really good. Like the guy who runs the local comic shop, he's just a real great guy. And he'll save books he knows that I really like, because he knows I'm an easy mark and he can easily sell it. And, a couple issues in, he was like, man, you really need to start picking this book up. It's outstanding. Mm-hmm. So not quite right away, but definitely it was on my radar. And then whenever I got the recommendation, I was like, okay, let's go.
No, it's funny because for me, I think I read Runaways definitely later. I think I read it somewhere in like late 2000s. I want to say it came out, 2003?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, I just looked it up. So it came out in July of 2003. Now, I had previously been reading Why the Last Man. Have you ever read Why the Last Man?
I have. It's outstanding. That was the first book that I picked up from Brian Vaughan, and I had to binge the entire thing. It was incredible, outstanding. Like there aren't enough adjectives to describe his writing.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's the key. Right, is Brian K. Vaughan is up there with Mark Millar when it comes to comic book writers. There's a few other people who take like the tropes of comic books and do them really well, like Mark Waid and people like that. But Brian K. Vaughan, he likes to not do what you're expecting. So that's why when I'd been reading Why the Last Man, and then I found out, we did this Marvel Runaways. I'm like, let me check that out. And I remember really enjoying it. And it was all out, the first volume, by the time I read it, if I remember properly. So I got to read it and I'm like, man, I want more. So I remember liking it a lot. And the big thing, and you pointed out, and I think this is maybe a thing that everyone points out, is how great it is that you have these people who aren't all one thing. So, and it's the truth of like kind of real life. So not everybody's a mutant. Not everybody's a super soldier. They all don't fall in these nice little packages of Inhumans. They all kind of have their own thing, which sets them apart from the others. You have, like you said, you have the tech guy and the bioengineering people and a lot of different diversity between them, which the other part is it's like the only superhero team, and I use the word team lightly because they never really refer to themselves as like Runaways or the Runaways or whatever you want to call it in terms of a superhero team. But they have, look at the numbers. You have 4 girls and two dudes. And even later on, at one point, I want to say it's like you had one dude. So later on, I'm not going to say what happens. You have like one dude and a female dinosaur. And it's like, look at this. Like, he's actually not trying to be like super comic booky with it. And he's writing to what he feels is good, not what fits into the right thing. To the point where...
They even don't refer to each other with superhero names. Like at one point,
they tried
Gert and Molly like test the waters, and everybody is like, "That's stupid. Let's not do that."
Exactly. But he does that with a lot of things. I remember specifically he does it with kind of the catchphrases where like it's clobbering time and all that. And then what is it? I could be wrong, but they make the joke of it saying, "Hey, I think our catchphrase is try not to die." I think that was a joke.
That sounds about right.
Yes. So that made me laugh. And Brian K. Vaughan has really brought me to it because I had also read Buffy Season 8, the comic, where he wrote the second part of it after Joss Whedon kind of started it off. I'm trying to think of what else he had done, but he's done so much. And
well, he also did Ex Machina, which is not... The movie that recently come out was not based in any way on that. So don't think that those two things are related. But he's like recently he's doing Paper Girls and Saga, which this is getting into comic book land. Saga came much later, but if you want to read something on the level of Star Trek or Star Wars, then Saga is kind of like a more adult Star Wars, because there's some stuff that happens in there that we will never see on television.
HBO. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, even there, like there's some stuff that goes on in there that's practically unfilmable.
Yeah, and for him, it's like does the stories he wants to do. He's worked for Marvel, DC, Image, Wildstorm, Dark Horse. He's done it all, and he finds out what he wants to do, and then he goes, okay, let's see what I can do, and then he puts a stamp on it, and it's great. And then this show already is kind of got that, like they're staying close enough to his vision that it's enjoyable, even if you kind of already know a little bit of what's going to happen. And things might change a little bit, but it'll be interesting.
And he is an executive producer on it. So whether or not they're actually taking his input, his name is on this program. So hopefully he's somewhere in there pulling them back from going too crazy and just kind of maintaining the core of the story. And I feel like, having seen the first 2 episodes, the core of the story is there, and that if he's not actively guiding them, somebody in a control position of that show respects his work to a point where they're not letting anyone else like deviate from the core too much.
Yep. And he reminds me a lot of Mark Miller when it comes to, he can do the superhero stuff, but he has a lot of that great stuff afterwards too.
Yeah.
In fact, I believe Mark Miller handed it off to Brian K. Vaughan for Ultimate X-Men. And I love that series.
Possibly. I don't remember. I didn't read a lot of the Ultimate line.
Oh, I was deep into it. A little too much. No. Anyways, so let's start our coverage of the show. Kind of kick it off. We start off with Alex. So Alex, at this point, very much feels like our main character, and he's the one who we kind of learn at the beginning of the story where Amy, a friend of his, passed away, and he's now playing the game that they used to play together on the video games that he hadn't done in a while. So the first episode that we'll be covering is Reunion, and the second episode is Rewind. So Reunion is, as you can expect, we're getting the characters together. And Rewind, we get to see the story from the parents' point of view. And we're going to kind of talk about it all as kind of one episode now. So like I said, you have Alex. And what did you think of kind of your first impressions of Alex when you first saw him?
Well, it's hard to talk about my first impression of Alex and not talk about my first impression of the Wilders, him and his parents all together, because in that first scene, we see him interacting with his dad. And they all three kind of, they all fit. First off, he looks like the Alex Wilder from the comic books, and I mean scary good. Like, they must have had pictures for the casting for the show. If you don't look 90% like this, don't even apply. Because like he and a few of the other kids just look so damn perfect. So as soon as I saw him like talking and moving, I was like, that is 100% Alex Wilder. I believe it. And it was interesting to see the dynamic between he and his parents, because he seemed a little more closed off and a little more like rebellious teenager-ish. Like he just was completely convinced that his dad has no basis for comparison for what he's going through. Like, and we all have that as a teenager, like nobody knows what I'm going through and I'm gonna have to deal with all this stuff on my own because I just can't burden anybody else with it. And that's like 100% what Alex is going through. And the friend who died is created for the television show. And I'm not real sure why, other than to kind of, I guess, give the kids a reason to be a little surly with each other and not want to hang out. And we have to say that these are extremely well-off children in LA. Like, these kids do not want for anything. These kids have everything they could ever need or want, and parents who will give them the world. So it was just interesting to see Alex being a very typical teenager, even though his position in the world, he might have just lost a friend, but he still has. Like, his parents could get him the best counseling. His parents could get him anything he needed to, like, cope with this. And his dad is still, like, just trying to be there for his kid. So it showed a lot about their relationship at the beginning of this show. And I think it showed a lot about just Alex in general, that he's dealing with some stuff right now. What about you? Like, what did you think of our opening of this show?
I thought it was spot on. Like you said, the look was there. So I think if you read the first version of Runaways, Alex really sticks out as the main character. And you said that before. He's kind of the kid who like kind of leads the way and gets things going. So to have him be the first one that we're kind of introduced to was super important. The idea of Amy, this character who doesn't exist in the comics, which in my head I'm like, I don't think this exists, and I'm glad you mentioned it didn't, because it makes me feel better knowing that I'm not crazy. And I can see why they did it. So in the comic books, unless I'm crazy, they pretty much only hung out once a year during this like event that the parents would put together.
Their parents would get together. And they didn't know why. It's just their parents would get together because they're influential and well-to-do, and that's what you do when you're influential and well-to-do. You get together and have galas where you all drink fancy drinks and talk about the problems of the world, and you shuffle your children off to, like, the west wing of the house because your house is just that damn big. And all these families would get together, and it was like the annual, all right, kids, you all kind of know each other. Now go to the other side of the house and don't bother us.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it was weird how they changed that from like this annual thing to, oh, you used to hang out with the kids of my friends, but you don't anymore. Why is that?
Mm-hmm. And I think that so you can get away with that in a comic book. I really feel like that's something you can get away with a comic. In a TV show, I think they needed to build up relationships quicker and say there's a reason why these kids would be invested in why they're together. They're friends, so they wanted there to be more of a background. And I can see that in terms of TV because that's more how TV's made. So I don't mind that they kind of have this shared history and a much more shared history than just seeing each other once a week. It sounds like they were like best friends and they hung out all the time. And there was the 7 of them, and now there's only 6. And even later on, he accidentally, when he's trying to get people together, it makes sense that he's trying to get them together. So I like that. And it adds a little more history. I think it also adds a lot more depth to the characters. And that's what they were looking for.
Yeah, and I can see all that. Like, the changes that they made for TV, even though it makes me bristle a little bit just being, like, the comic book. Like, I freaking love comic books. And whenever they change anything, I'm like, why are you touching my stuff? Like, no, you're doing it wrong. Do it right. It
was perfect.
And, yeah, it was wonderful the way it was. And I could do 1,000 hours on stuff that people get wrong. But the TV and comic books are different media, so things do have to change a little bit. And yeah, I get why they did this. I get why they added this character Amy and why she's given some emotional weight to these kids hanging out again. They're not just hanging out because, well, it's November again, so we're going to hang out. He's kind of getting the band back together. Like he's going to work on, the last time they hung out, Amy was still around and now she's not, and we're all sad about it, but we can still be friends. Like we can still, we've got to, at some point we've got to pick up and move on. And like, I miss my friends. So that was fun. And I get why they did it.
Mm-hmm. And, her parents are Catherine and Jeffrey. Her mother's a successful lawyer and her father is like a businessman. Like I think they make them specifically in real estate, for the show. I don't remember if that was.
Yes,
there's such a small piece. So
Jeffrey Wilder is in real estate, which kind of that's later in the show. In these 2 episodes, we kind of find out that being in real estate is not nearly as kind of boring as it sounds because he's actually
he's an old gang member.
He's an old gang member turned into real estate guy, which he kind of mixes the two a little bit. He still uses intimidation and blackmail, shall we say, to seal the deal on some things.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like he was pretty much the top of the gang when he was and he got out and basically gave somebody else the job.
Yeah, he kind of like handed all of that off to somebody, and one of the better scenes from the parents' perspective, like the episode number 2, is whenever he has to go back to that guy who's now trying to strong arm him. This gangster is trying to strong arm Jeffrey Wilder, and he's saying, "Oh well, we're going to shut this build down, and you guys aren't going to do anything here until you got to pay us money now." Well, Jeffrey shows up with a laptop, and he goes, and he opens it up, and there's a video from this gangster's like grandmother's house, and he's like, "No, you guys are all going to pack up and go because whenever I gave all of this to you, I was still the top dog. That doesn't mean that I'm not. That just means you run things now. So unless you want something to happen to your grandma, you and your friends need to go away so that my business can keep going." Mm-hmm. It was so nice to see someone of that magnitude, like still holding on to that little bit of, he was a gangster. He was running things, and that hasn't gone away. So for him to be part of this, like, evil group of parents called the Pride, we're just going to start referring to them as the Pride, mm-hmm. For him to be, like, a representative, if not, like, because I always get the feeling he's the leader of the Pride. Like, he's the one calling the shots, and whenever it all boils down, like, it's his deal. So it's not that he's necessarily not a gangster anymore. His stakes are just way bigger, and he's just got more resources and more everything because it's a much bigger deal.
Yeah, that's interesting because for me, at least in the comic book, you're right. But in the show so far, and we'll get to it when we talk about it, I feel like there's another character who's kind of in charge of the Pride. And it's not necessarily him. In fact, I don't even see him as, like, this is going to be a weird, but I don't feel like in the family, I feel like he's like number 2 when it comes to who's in charge. Like, I felt like Catherine, the mother, was very much more in control of what was going on. Like, he was like looking to her in a way, but I can see from a comic book standpoint, if I'm, remembering, that he was more of like in charge of the Pride, where here I felt somebody else was.
And here's where we're going to come to a major difference in the two. The comic books, we never see anything from the parents' perspective. They are mustache twirling evil people that we never see their perspective. We barely see their reasoning. And we're never given their point of view on practically anything so that they can remain, well, they're just evil parents, which kind of works in the story you're trying to tell about a bunch of rebellious kids. You don't need to see the parents' reasoning because you don't need to sympathize with them at all because you're reading a comic book about these kids that are running away. Now, in the TV show, I can totally get, even though it's a huge difference, and as soon as about 10 minutes into the second episode, I was like, why are we paying attention to the parents? No one cares. Well, by the end of the episode, I cared. Because the parents, they've actually constructed a real compelling storyline around the parents, as well as they're not one-dimensional. Like, they didn't just make, much like the children are very multidimensional and have a lot of facets to them, the parents, it would have been so easy to play the Wilders as, well, he's like this rough gangster type from this harsh background, and now he's in a business suit, but he's still like relies on a bunch of stereotypical tropey bullshit, which that is not the case at all. Like, he is a very well-composed man who just happens to used to be a gangster, and his wife is not some woman who is just married to him. She is a force in her own right, and she's a very powerful woman in her own right, and she, even without him, I really feel like she would be where she is in life just because of her own success.
In fact, I don't think he would be where he is without her, though.
Very possible. And
I felt that way.
I got that same feeling from every set of parents. Gert's parents, who were like these weird hippie vegans, which we'll later find out, at least if it stays true to the comic books, they're time traveling scientists that like go in, in the far future and in the past. And, they feel so real. They like, there's times where they dip into, okay, these vegans or these like homeopathic people are very like, this is played for laughs and silly, but at the same time, it's never like a one-note thing. It's those people just are so earnestly playing those roles that it comes off a little hokey at times, but they never deviate from that. That is those characters that, they are this kind of person. Nico's parents, they're not too happy with each other, but they kind of have to stay together for the things that the Pride is doing. And I think they're both in like venture capital. So they fund some of the things that the other parents are doing, but at the same time, all of these parents, like, they appreciate the other sets of parents, but they don't really trust them.
Let's kind of go and talk a little bit about we'll grab each family and talk about them. So we did the Wilders. So let's talk about a little bit about Nico. I'm never going to say Minoru, and then her mother, Tina, and her father, Robert. So like you were saying, they kind of, they're the venture capital, they're angel investors, you learn, I think, later on. And then their daughter was Amy. The girl that passed away was their daughter, and her mother is, the room is like immaculate, the same as when she lived there. And the big issue we see is Nico goes in there to borrow some leggings, and then breaks an award, a trophy, and this becomes a big issue. What are your thoughts overall? Like, do you like what they've shown so far with Nico in the first 2 episodes?
Well, here's the thing. Nico is my favorite character from the series. I feel like out of everyone in the original, 6, she's the one who had the deepest character. Like, she's the one I feel was the most well written out of all of them, which is saying something. Whenever we just talked about how everything in the series was well written, I really feel like she is the standout character. And the young lady that's playing her, Lyrica Okano, looks 1000% like her. Like, every time I see a picture of her in the comic book, I hear Lyrica's voice now saying those words, because she just personifies that character so well. And to see her parents also interacting with her and also dealing with this older sister that passed away, their family is very broken right now. And I really, it's terrible to say, I enjoy it, but it makes for really good storytelling. It makes for really good moments between these characters whenever, stuff happens later and her parents react a certain way, and you're always thinking about, okay, well, are they just being overprotective because of what happened to the sister, or are they just overreacting because their living daughter has become so distant from them? There's a lot of dynamics going on in her little corner of this story that it was just so, it had me glued to the television. Like, I was like, oh man, this is so good. So yeah, I mean, I think much like the book, I think this is my favorite little slice of this amazing pie.
Mm-hmm. And like we said, so everyone's kind of got their special role. So Alex, it seems very much the mob family, right? Mobsters.
Right.
His mother's a lawyer. His father is a businessman. And the idea that you get from these first two episodes is, first, Nico is specifically a Wiccan. And they talk about that. And then her mother is just straight on witch powers.
Yeah. The Wilders are definitely kind of, they're not even powered individuals. They're just powerful in that they have resources and everything like that. Well, the Minorus are witches. They all have some kind of witchcraft about them, and they have a staff that's like part of their family that Nico is going to inherit / steal, and it's going to allow her to do magic, and which sounds kind of silly, but thanks to Doctor Strange being a thing, we now know in the MCU that magic is real, and just deal with it.
It's what, the staff of one?
Yeah, the staff of one. This is another one of the weird differences between the TV show and the comic book. In the comic book, she had to bleed and then recite like this little couplet, and then the staff would just erupt from her body. Well, in the interest of let's not glorify self-harm, they took that out. In the show, she's not ever going to do that, and I don't even think the staff is ever going to actually like hide inside of her. So that's,
it's not going to be there.
Yeah, so, and that's fine. Currently it lives like inside of a shadow box on the wall. But I don't know, man. I just love this character, and I feel like they are doing it right on television. So thumbs up for Nico.
Mm-hmm. And they said, I think you pointed out that it was for good reason they didn't go through with that. They're like, there's a lot of young people show, and they didn't want to promote anything like that because it's a pretty serious topic. And then what's interesting, like you bring up Doctor Strange, and there's the part that Tina Minoru is actually in Doctor Strange, but not named.
Right. And not played by this actress. So sometimes they do this.
Yes. And they just felt it was, recast the role. I mean, it would have been cool if they would have brought the same person, and then people could have made that point without, like, reading about it. But it's fine. I think the mother, Tina, done really, really well in her role.
Well, there's a big difference in having a character that's like part of an ensemble in a major TV show. Well, not major, but in a TV show
it's major.
Actually being, I think it's major, who is actually being front and center and having a ton of lines and being a central part of the plot, and a character who's just kind of like into scenes in the background, So, and I'm not trying to disparage the lady who was in Doctor Strange, but it just, there's different expectations whenever you're in those two different kind of roles. And maybe this lady just fulfilled the greater roles expectations.
And that's good. We'll move on to the next. So the evil scientist, like the technologist, right, is the next kind of trope that we're going to be looking at. And man, was I happy to see someone that I really know, James Marsters, as Victor Stein, wife Janet, and obviously their son Chase. Man, it was just great. And like, I like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I've liked James Marsters.
That's where that guy is from.
Yes.
What? I'd spent like both of those episodes going, who is that guy? Why does he look familiar? And me being me, I was like, I'm not going to look it up. That would be too easy. I'm just going to sit here and wonder about it for a week solid. Holy crap. Okay. All right. Sorry for that diversion, but yeah, go.
No, and I mean, for me, my favorite book series is the Dresden Files, and he is the one who reads the audiobooks for it. So James Marsters is one of my favorites. So I was very excited that he did this. There's a funny thing where people don't, because he played Brainiac in Smallville as well.
Holy crap. This guy's all over the place.
All come together. But the funny thing about him is he's from LA, but everybody thinks he's actually from England because everyone saw him as Spike. And they're like, oh, that must be his real accent. So, but when I saw him, I thought it was great. And yeah, I thought he's been playing this role great. Like, when he looks at Chase and says, if you were really afraid of me, you'd be getting an A, when he's talking about how he did great in lacrosse, and then he got a C in Spanish, and that's his worst problem right now. I was like, man, I'm afraid of him.
Yeah, he was very menacing. It always felt like every time he was on the screen dealing with either his son Chase or his wife Janet, that it was just this side of physical abuse. That I honestly kept waiting for him to start putting his hands on his family, because he just seems that menacing, and that he is that close to violence like all the time. I don't know if it was just me. I mean, did you ever get the feeling that he was at any time about to just snap and start going physical with people? I
mean, it definitely felt that way, but I'm glad they didn't go there. And they show throughout that he's under a lot of pressure himself, and that he pushes that pressure onto his kid and onto his family, which is what a lot of people do. Like, they take their stress and then they project onto other people. And he obviously is a different level, like a higher and above, like even my stress, because he needs this machine to work, obviously, to do what it needs to be done. Otherwise, the Pride can't be successful. So you start to learn like everyone's individual. Like,
let's take a small divergence from the characters, and we're being obtuse about what the Pride's goals are, because we've read the books and we know. And the show isn't telling us yet. So we're not obfuscating just to be dicks. We're obfuscating so that we don't spoil anything, because I think it's a really good reveal whenever it happens. So whenever we say something like what Adam just said with, he's doing this stuff so that the Pride can succeed. Yeah, that's kind of vague. It's supposed to be vague. Because right now, like, even in the show, we have no clue what the Pride are going for. So we're playing along, trying to keep it fun.
Yes. And, we don't want to ruin anything. I mean, even then, we might even say a few things that they give a few things away, like what people are. But, like, their goals could be different. That's the other thing. I don't want to say, oh, this is their goal, and then they change it up on us. So.
True. Very true.
So, yeah. So you see his stress, and then you have Chase, who puts that stress onto him about this being the best at everything. And here, we talked about it as well, is Chase is super intelligent in this show. He's definitely the dumb jock in the comic, and he's intelligent even to the point where he's designing his fistigons. We'll just call them the fistigons.
Right. Well, I mean, those are the things he picks up in the book, and that's kind of what he runs around with for a while. But in the book, those were a creation of his dad. Like, he was barely smart enough to work the damn things, much less create them. And here in the show, that he's doing that. So I guess they're just playing him up as a kid who doesn't give a crap about school, even though he's very intelligent, which I think kind of takes something away from the character. Because, in the book, he was the dumb jock, and he got stuff wrong a lot. But he was, even though he didn't fit in with the other kids in any way, he wasn't as smart as them, and he just ran with a different crowd than them. He still ended up, loving those other kids, and those were his family, and those were the people he would do anything for. And I think whenever it's weird to say that the dumb jock was the outsider, But for that group, he absolutely was. And for him to kind of get over all of that and still care about him that much, I think meant a lot and says a lot. And I think that they're kind of, by making him smarter in the show, they're taking some of that away. Just me.
Mm-hmm. No, I can see what you're saying. But I like the changes they made to him. Otherwise, he'd feel like he doesn't have a role to play other than just punching people with the fistigon, right?
Right, fair enough.
But I can see why they made the changes they did. Again, these little changes aren't too bad for me.
Yeah, they're not deal breakers, but they are changes. So I'm going to point them out because they rustle my jimmies.
Other than that, I mean, that's what you get out of the Stein. And what else? We have the Dean. So you have Carolina, Frank, and Leslie. So this Leslie Dean, so she's kind of in charge of the Church of Gibborim.
Yep, the Church of Gibborim.
Yep. And she's the one who, to me, that stood out as kind of in charge of the whole thing. That, like when I was talking about earlier, to me, it's like they were listening to her, which is funny because then in the exact opposite, you have Frank, who literally has nothing to do with the pride.
Which is another change. Like in the book, every parent was 100% in, and here Frank knows about as much as the kids know, if not less. Not Carolina. Leslie is definitely in a leadership role. I will concede that. And that Frank is oblivious. She's got her church set up to where it's kind of like Scientology, I guess, where the more devoted you are and the more you've done for the church, like the more they'll open stuff up for you, and the more, and like kind of the higher up you
alpha
go.
Status.
Yeah, alpha status. It was all very culty and weird. And Frank wants to get there. And even the people who work for the church are like, people like, you would think that the guy married to the lady running the whole thing would have a little bit of access, but those people are like, no, your wife said you can't be in there, so you can't go in that room. Sorry. Haha. And since you love your wife, you're going to uphold her rules. So go away. It was such a weird thing. I kind of didn't like Frank Dean. Leslie was cool. It was fun to see her kind of like the things that she's got hidden in the like, I'm wondering how much the rest of the pride know about what she's got in her special room in the church. Cause, I don't know, man. I think that like with all like leagues of evil, you expect them to, there's like, okay, we're all evil and we know we're all evil. So what are we all hiding from each other? I'm waiting for all of that to come out. No. But I liked the Deans in general. I like the difference in how every other set of parents is like a team, and these two definitely have like, okay, well, you just do church stuff, and she's churchy, but she also does her pride stuff, and he's not involved in all of it. It was fun. It was interesting.
Yeah, and without giving too much away, it definitely feels super Scientology. There's that interesting part at the party where Carolina takes off her wristband, and then she's all like pinky, glowy craziness.
Right.
And it'll be interesting.
Which that's her power. But by the way, like in the books, Carolina Dean is an alien, and whenever they're on Earth, they have to wear those wristbands so that it kind of like inhibits their powers, which is basically like glowy, flyy power. Mm-hmm. And whenever her wristband gets knocked off, we saw what happened there. She gets all glowy, and then she kind of passes out. Well, other people in the church don't have that problem because they're all humans. Like she asks somebody and they take off their wristband and they don't glow. So it's kind of, she doesn't know where she stands in things. I don't even think she realizes she's an alien.
Right now she doesn't know.
That's right.
So we're not even, technically, I think, in terms of the show, we're not sure if that's actually gonna...
True, that might not be the case. It might be something different.
Right, so we don't know because they haven't explained it at all. Eventually they will, I'm sure, or at least explain what this glow is.
Right.
The only person, we can probably start talking about her, is Molly Hernandez. She's the only one who's really shown a power, right? Alex, he's kind of a strategic thinker, and he kind of shows it later on in the episode where it's like, hey, this is what we're going to do to to hide that we saw what was going on.
Right.
But Molly specifically shows that she has super strength when she crushes the table at the nurse's office and pushes the vehicle. And so
but her strength comes at a price.
Right.
Every time she uses it to any degree, she gets super sleepy. So she like pushes this vehicle and then takes a nap. And I mean, doesn't like go to her room to take a nap. Like, all right, well, I'm just going to sit on the floor right here and take a nap.
Right. And I think maybe that's something where it's because she hasn't really used her power. She hasn't got him good, like really good at it. And I guess Carolina, we see that she does the same thing. And it could definitely be something along the lines of, okay, they need to master these in order to use them properly. Now, Molly, she definitely has changes too. Like, one, her last name, because she's Molly Hayes in the comics. And her parents are alive in the comics.
Yeah, and she's not separated from them. So that's weird.
Because the Pride has 12 parents in the comic, and they really only have 9 that are aware of what's going on in the show right now. Although... we might hopefully, I think later on we'll find out a little bit more about her parents, because it would be cool to kind of see where she comes from prior to be taken in by Gertrude's mom and dad,
right?
By the Yorks.
Yeah, I think that they just did that so that they could have 2 less people to deal with, because I mean the show is already pretty sizable. We've got the 6 children and then 10 parents between them. Yep. So that's a cast of 16. That's pretty substantial. I don't think, like, I'm trying to think of another show that's got a giant cast, and I think that Game of Thrones, even on their like super busy seasons, has like 12 to 14 people that we care about. You know, obviously there's going to be like tertiary characters that just show up and do a little bit, but like main cast that we're supposed to keep up with, I think Game of Thrones might hit 16 every now and again. And that's just before like 5 people die.
Exactly. And what they do here is that's why Frank, Carolina's dad, you don't see much of him, and what you do see of him is not horribly important. That's why Molly's parents are dead. You have Chase's mom is there, but she's not like super important. Same with Robert Minoru. So there's 6, so that's half of the parents that are not as important as they really should be, because you need to focus on a couple to make it important. So you have 6 that are very strong-willed and really part of it. So, and I mean, so then you have Stacey and Dale Yorks. They're the bioengineers.
And they've adopted Molly.
Yes, they've adopted Molly here.
So Gert and Molly kind of are sisters, but not really. I mean, they're siblings in that they live in the same home and they're growing up together, but they're not siblings because they know that they're not actually blood related. So, but it's a fun dynamic between the 2 of them, and I like that whenever they did cut out the parents, they did make this choice to, well, let's just, it just kind of strengthens the bond between those 2 characters, and that now Gert has an even stronger reason to just look out for her friend, because that's also her sister, and Gert's parents being the like vegan homeopathic people that I was talking about earlier.
Yes, exactly.
Which is hilarious. They're like,
and the actor Kevin Weissman, like
he's so perfect.
Yeah, and you've seen him he's just in tons of stuff, and that's why they are kind of funny in this. And that character just can't help but be funny, or that actor can't help but be funny. If you ask me, he kind of has a kind of a natural talent for comedy, and it works.
Yeah, and his parents they're almost like stream of consciousness, like scatterbrained, where every time the subject changes, they just keep talking. Mm-hmm. They'll just like pick up on whatever other people are talking about, and they'll just like nonstop keep going. And sometimes it gets a little uncomfortable because the things are just, it's like they have no filter and they don't know when to stop talking about things like bodily functions that other people maybe don't want to talk about.
Mm-hmm. And you can feel like I wouldn't say they're at the bottom of the chain Pride, but they feel like the outsiders.
Yeah. They feel like the outsiders, and you understand it because every time he tries to talk to somebody else, you can see him making these like social faux pas. You're like, probably shouldn't have said that. Probably shouldn't have done that.
Yep.
And even he's like, I shouldn't have said that, should I? So it's very interesting characters. And what they've done with all of these parents, now that we've like introduced all of them and we've got our footing with them all, they've made these parents just as well-rounded and just as three-dimensional as the children, where they all have kind of, I don't want to say character-like things about them because I think that's a little too reductive, but they all definitely kind of embody a thing, but they also have a lot more depth than that. And not only that, but they're supposed to be the evil group of evil villains of evil. And they all really love their kid, and they all want their kid to be happy, and they all want, in their own weird way, what's best for the rest of the Pride. Like, they want what they're doing to succeed because it's going to be good. Not be like, they're not. That's the weird thing about the Pride, is that so far they're, other than the maybe sacrifice of a person, which happened in the first episode, so I'm not really spoiling anything. Other than that, they haven't really done anything that's like evil. So it's one of those things where they've made me a person who used to not care about the Pride other than, well, they're the bad guys. Now I care about them. Now I'm like, I see that these are realized people and very strong characters. And as much as the second episode started to grate on my nerves because it wasn't about the kids, by the end of it, I was invested in all of those parents. Like, none of them felt like a caricature or one-dimensional or weak in any way. They all felt really strong and very realized. Like, this show has incredible writing, and it shows through not just in the kids, but also in the parents.
Mm-hmm. No.
Am I alone in this?
No, you're 100% right. The parents, you care about them. They got a couple, I think, key actors that you've met before, so the way you like them, and then the other ones are just doing a great job overall. I can honestly say that no one's acting is subpar here. There's no one that stands out as a problem, which is super important, I think, in such an ensemble. There's a large amount of them. Everybody's their own person, so everyone kind of has their own feeling, and you don't get people confused as big, because a lot of times when you start to get big groups, especially in the first 2 episodes of a show, you run into an issue where you're like, was that person? Was it that person? You don't remember who they are. And I think that's,
the characters kind of bleed into each other. And I think that to this show's credit, they've crafted, like, each family has kind of their thing. Nico's family are all witches, and they, like, the parents are kind of at odds with each other. Alex's family they're all just very intelligent and very strategic minded, and their dynamic, you can tell even whenever the parents are just talking to each other, they really, really care about each other. The Yorks are very eccentric. The Deans are extremely, I don't want to say shallow or vapid, because I do feel like there's a lot going on, like, under the surface there, but they're very, like, they're the very pretty people, you know, for lack of a better way to, like, describe it. They're just, like, very gorgeous. So each family definitely feels like they have their own little niche that they occupy, as well as no two dynamics feel the same. The Steins you couldn't exchange the Steins with the Wilders and have the same effect. So I just, again, like, credit to the writers that they've made this huge ensemble cast all feel like each character has their own voice.
Yep. So both episodes end with the same event happening. The kids get into the study, open up the door, and then they actually watch as their parents sacrifice a young girl, Destiny Gonzalez, who really starts to show off when she looks like she's getting attacked by some gang members, but then the church takes her in. And so So what ends up happening is obviously they're going to sacrifice. So the kids watch it, and then they freak out and have to run away because they're trying to hold Molly back because she's the youngest, so she doesn't have to see it. And she takes a picture, setting off a flash, and the parents all freak out. Well, they don't freak out. That's not the right word.
The parents realize that something is happening
going on, and they quickly, put on their normal clothes, not their ritual clothing, and get upstairs to figure out what exactly is happening. What are your thoughts on kind of the way the kids explained away how they got out, right? Like the power went out, right?
Yeah, Alex basically, like, the kids get out first because they don't have to get out of these ceremonial robes. They just run back up the stairs and shut the secret door and then go off. And they're panicking, trying to figure out how to spin this and how to play this. And Alex comes up with, no, we'll just say that the flash was a power surge. And, that way the power didn't go out, but the power did blink or whatever. This flash happens, but it doesn't matter because we were on the other side. We were over here in this room, playing Twister like we used to as kids. And by the time the parents get to them, sure enough, all these kids are tangled up on the Twister board, and they all really sell it that I guess we missed each other more than we thought. And, being here and seeing these games kind of brought back a lot of memories. And the parents still felt a little suspicious, but the kids just sold it so well that you want to believe them, that you want to believe that all these kids are just enjoying being with each other again. And other than a few times earlier in the episodes where the kids had a little thing to be happy about, this is the first time we saw all of these kids actually grinning and laughing and just having a great time. Previously, for the first half of both the first and second episode, these kids were kind of sullen and just down and not really enjoying anything except for Chase whenever he was out partying. But when you see them all together and all just having a great time, it's like, man, these are good kids. Look at them. They're having a great time. They're all happy, smiley. And so I really feel like the parents wanted to believe them, wanted to believe that, you know what, these kids are going to pull out of it. They're going to stop being angsty little assholes forever, and they're going to just be good kids. This is great.
Mm-hmm. No, it's interesting. So, I mean, it's exciting to see the show come to life, or the comic come to life in the show form. And I feel like they did a great job in these first two episodes, getting to know the characters, setting the characters different, so we, like we said, don't get them confused when we're talking about it, and moving forward where they're going to go with everything. So, I can't wait to see what's to come overall. Any final thoughts before we call this an episode?
I will say, the one thing that we should probably end this on that kind of sets up episode 3 is that Alex's dad is going through his study. Now, the study is the room that has the secret passage down to the ceremony room where they sacrifice people. The kids were not in the study. Well, Alex's dad finds Molly's hairpin, a very cartoony, goofy looking hairpin, in his study, in a room that the kids had no reason to be in. So we kind of end episode 2 on this cliffhanger of Mr. Wilder having this hairpin. So he knows that the kids might not have lied, but they certainly weren't truthful. And I really liked that cliffhanger. I really liked that. Where does this go? It was so I love tension, and that built the tension so well because it would have been easy to end that episode with, and the kids lied and got away with it. See you next week. But they didn't. They gave us that little bit of, no, man, the Wilders are intelligent, and he sees this thing, and he knows what that might mean.
Mm-hmm. One other thing, I guess that's super important that I just thought of that we should point out was right before this ending, everyone kind of has their own little ending, I guess, at the end. And the ending for Molly and Gert is Molly kind of crawls into Gert's bed because, she, with everything going on, she's scared. And then Gert is singing to her kind of a lullaby. And then it pans down and you see a dinosaur.
Yes. It's I'm so excited for what that means. Let's not spoil it. Let's wait and
right. We'll leave it there.
We'll see if it pans out in 3 or 4. But
we see a dinosaur.
Yeah, we see a dinosaur. There's a dinosaur in the house.
Why don't you go ahead and let everybody know where they can get a hold of you?
People can track me down on Twitter at not_D_Goodwin, where I'm talking about comic books and video games and all the shenanigans I get up to in that vein, or they can come catch at my other podcast called Super Heroic, where I don't nearly get in as depth with comic book movies and TV shows as I do here, but I do cover all of them. So come check us out over there if you want like some news and some movie reviews.
Awesome. You can reach me directly at Geek of Random on Twitter and see anything I'm up to. If you have any of your opinions about this show or any shows that we cover, please email us at feedback@electricstreams.com or follow us at Electric Stream on Twitter. I'd like to remind everyone that Electric Streams is funded primarily by our listeners, so we'd love for your support. And I always mess up on this. I'd like to remind everyone that Electric Stream is funded primarily by our listeners, so we would love your support to be able to provide all the content that we produce for you guys. Whether you're interested in extras or just want to help us out, you can donate at patreon.com/electricstreams. Also, if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to Electric Streams on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or whatever podcasting app you choose. And we'll see you next time as we cover Marvel's Runaways, Episode 3, Destiny.